Hello, my name is Christina Ristari, and I'm doing this presentation for class CIS 5530. Today I'll be doing a brute force attack on a Windows PC using the protocol RDP, which is remote desktop. It listens to port TCP port 3389. I will be focusing on that. I'm going to use Kali Linux, and I'm going to use a tool called Hydra. If system administrators do not have certain policies in Windows configured correctly, hackers can attack this port and take over a user's PC. So I'm going to show you how that's done. There's a couple ways to do it, but I'm going to use Hydra on the RDP port, and I'm going to then show you how to mitigate, how system administrators can mitigate this from happening. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is, if I was an attacker, I would want to know what ports in the network are available. Like, who are the hosts, and in the network. So for this, I'm going to use fping, and this basically sweeps the network and only displays the live hosts. And as it's displaying the live hosts, I'm seeing my laptop's IP, which is the one I'm going to focus on right now, and that is the IP address. Well, the ones that I statically gave it. Okay, so now that I see that my IP address is available, I'm going to go ahead and do an nmap. And what this does is this tells me whether RDP is open and available. The parameter SS is a SYN scan, and it's a half open scan. The parameter PN is, it tells nmap to target the machine, and even though it's not available, scan it anyways. Even though it can't be pinged, scan it anyways. And the SV parameter is it tells nmap the version of the protocol that it detects. So this is going to take a second, but it should return that port 3389, which is the remote desktop port, is open. So we'll just wait for that to finish. Okay, so it pulled up the available ports, and right here is 3389, which is my laptop's remote desktop port, and it is open. Okay, so now we can go ahead and perform the Hydra attack. And I'm going to use, actually before I do that, I want to change the directory. I want to go into the directory where I created two word lists. One of them is for the username, and one of them is for the passwords. And I created these because I wanted to use these lists for the presentation because they're not really long. Hackers usually use really, really long lists, and the scans take a long time. But for purposes of this presentation, I'm using two lists I created. A username list with a whole bunch of usernames in it, one of them being the username of the PC I'm attacking is in there, and then another list for the passwords, various passwords, with one of them being actually the password that's the password for the laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Hydra command, the AL parameters for my user list that I created, the P parameters for the password list. I put the IP address of my laptop, which is what I'm attacking, and then the protocol RDP. And as you can see, it did pull up the username and password. And It was successful. So, and it didn't take very long because my password lists aren't very long. Okay, so now that the Hydra pulled it up, let's go in now and see if we can take over the user's desktop. So we're going to pull up another terminal. In this terminal, I'm going to use Remna, which is Kali Linux version of remote desktop. It's going to pull up another window, and in this window, I'm going to put the IP address of the laptop, which is 10, 10, 10. And it's going to pull up the remote desktop authentication credentials, where I'm going to put that username and password and that it found. Click OK. And this is the desktop. As you can see, this is the desktop on my laptop. Make it a little bigger, but you can see it's a smaller window, but you can make it bigger. And then I'll have full control of the machine. So now, ways to mitigate this. So there's a few ways to mitigate this. First of all, system administrators should make sure that the users have strong passwords. Letters, numbers, symbols, caps, and they're long. As you can see, that password in mine is very short. It's a few numbers, easily to be hacked, including the username. But additionally, in local policy settings, well, actually local security settings, there is a way for system administrators to set the number of attempts that a user would have to, a hacker would have to, be only given 3 attempts. It's usually the standard. And in the local security policy is the account lockout policy. This is where you're going to set it to 3. Once you set it to 3, it will automatically change the account lockout duration and the counter to 30 minutes. And just this one change would render Hydra useless. There is other ways also additionally, but first let's see that I'm going to go into my laptop now, and I'm going to change these settings in my laptop and see if we're still able to hack it. I think it has to make those changes. And as you can see, the command, the Hydra attack, did not work this time. It did not find a valid password. Okay, so there are a couple other ways for system administrators to handle this. Another way is to configure a firewall role for port 3389, only allowing whitelisted remote IP addresses that have been added to the scope of the port list to be able to access the RDP session. And another way is to block all RDP ports and use a VPN to access a private network that has access to an RDP session. This will open up a secure terminal and between the remote desktop and the corporate network, and this is useful when managing like cloud-based Windows servers instances on the internet. Lastly, there's another way. However, you have to have an Azure license, a multi-factor authentication license, but you can enable two-factor authentication on all window logins and RDP and VPN sessions in the server manager authentication policies, and this is done on the workstation connections. And you can receive a SMS or a mobile application multi-factor authentication challenge question using Network Policy Server extension in Azure AD. But like I said before, you would need the Azure license. So that is another way, and that's a very foolproof way on some of these attacks. So that's it. I've showed you how the attack is done. I've also presented to you some mitigation ways to mitigate and to stop these attacks from happening. System administrators should always make sure the passwords are strong and hard to guess. And then I've showed you that in changing the local security policies on the account lockout and the number of tries, it renders Hydra useless. It couldn't get in. All right, so thank you very much. I've attached a PowerPoint presentation of the entire presentation if you wanted to go ahead and view it and try it yourself. I hope this helps. Thank you very much and take care. Have a good day.